Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We have a great show in store for you this morning because we have a lot of breaking news. We've got a lot of community events that I'm going to bring to your attention. Also, we're going to be talking with Whey Jennings, the grandson of Waylon Jennings. He's going to be in Hornell this Sunday. We're going to find out all about him, all about his music, and all about the show coming up on Sunday. Okay, let's first go to some viewer comments. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning, Mark. Almost reversed our names. Matt Van Epps wins the congressional seat. He said he will work hand in hand with Trump, and Trump helped him win in Tennessee. You got to like Nashville to win Tennessee. Yeah, not just like Nashville, not hate Nashville. And I watched Afton Ben. I hope I pronounced that right. I've only ever seen it written out. That's just how this works sometimes. Give her losing speech. No wonder she lost. She is a little wacky, says Mark. Well, she's definitely, Trump called her the AOC of Tennessee, which has a nice ring to it. Another comment from a different viewer. Great news for the Republican win in Tennessee. Yes. We're going to talk about it more in depth throughout the whole program because it is the breaking story. But it's one of those fascinating looks inside the media as well, because when a Republican wins, somehow it's still a loss. If you look at the headlines at CNN and some of the other mainstream media, far left outlets, you would have thought the Republican lost. And because remember, the narrative that we talked about is if the Democrats won, it was all over. The midterm was all over. Democrats were going to win. Just prepare. Now that it did not go their way, they have to spin it to make it still look as if Democrats are going to win the midterms. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, if you are just waking up, Republican Matt Van Epps, just like Mark told us, narrowly defeated Democrat Afton Ben in Tuesday's hotly contested special election for Tennessee's 7th District House seat. Ben had raised Democrats' hopes for an upset in the conservative stronghold after late polling showed the state lawmaker within striking distance of Van Epps. Van Epps led by about 6 percentage points with 85% of the ballots counted Tuesday night when the Associated Press called the race for the Republican at 9:37 p.m. Trump posting on Truth Social last night, congratulations to Matt Van Epps on his big congressional win in the great state of Tennessee. The radical left Democrats threw everything at him, including millions of dollars. Another great night for the Republican Party, President DJT. So this was a major race. It does have a lot of implications for the midterm. On Monday, Mike Johnson stumped for Van Epps on the ground in the Middle Tennessee district, and Trump held 2 tele-rallies urging voters to head out to the polls. So we're going to talk about it a little more in depth, look at some of the numbers. Obviously, it is a breaking story, though it was called last night at 9:37. Still waiting for, final official numbers, but Van Epps led by about 6 percentage points. As we said, there was already a concession speech by Ben. So again, a prime example of the media now trying to spin it. If you go elsewhere than here, you'll see that spin where they're trying to suggest, for some reason, even with the win, Republicans lose. But we'll talk about that. Comment from a different viewer. This came in yesterday. Wow, Trump indicated that within the next few years, no income tax. Yes, Trump saying that Americans may soon pay no income tax as the White House explores alternative revenue streams. President Donald Trump suggested Tuesday that Americans may not even have income tax to pay in the near future, saying tariff-driven revenue could allow for the historic elimination of the federal income tax under his tenure. Trump told a press gaggle after his cabinet meeting that at some point in the not-too-distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay, arguing that revenue the government is collecting under his administration is now so great, so enormous. Whether you get rid of it or just keep it around for fun or have it really low, much lower than it is now, but you won't be paying income tax. I like that, keeping it around for fun. So we will keep a close eye on that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, to that viewer. I know the president had talked about that a little bit in the past when tariffs first came up, that it could be seen as a way to relieve people from the burden of paying income tax. We have a lot of stories, not a lot of way to segue these stories, but there is a lot of breaking news this morning, such as the $6.25 billion seed money for the Trump accounts for kids. We're going to talk about that in just a second. First, just because there's no way to segue into this, we talk so often, this is kind of an update from a story that we bring to you on the regular, which is this anti-Semitism on college campuses, and now, of course, in the streets as well. And then you see Mom Donnie's win, who has said some very anti-Semitic things in the past. So it's a troubling sign, and people say, where does this hate come from? Listen to this. A Brooklyn middle school principal has denied a parent's request to have a Holocaust survivor speak to students about anti-Semitism. What was the excuse? To not let a Holocaust victim speak at his Brooklyn middle school? The principal says the victim's pro-Israel views are not appropriate for a public school. MS 447 principal Aaron Rush wrote to the parents on November 18th, claiming Nazi labor camp survivor Sammy Stegman's opinions would not be right for the high school, or for the middle school. Quote, in looking at his website material, I also don't think that Sammy's presentation is right for our public school setting, given his messages around Israel and Palestine. I've got to say, just at the very basic, a principal talks about the speaker and doesn't call him Mr. Stegman, calls him Sammy by his first name? Huh. I don't know, that just seems like, I know, a minuscule thing. I'd love to explore other speakers, she said, insisting that lectures about the Holocaust, the Nazi slaughter of 6 million Jews during World War II, and combating anti-Semitism are still welcome. Just not when the opportunity arises? Stegman, 85, does not discuss the Israel-Hamas war on his homepage or in his bio. So keep that in mind as she was looking for excuses. During some posted online lectures, he makes it clear he's a proud Jew who supports Israel and the Jewish state's right to defend itself from enemies such as Hamas. In one lecture, he said, what's happening in the Middle East, we will prevail, we will win. In every generation they tried to annihilate us, we prevailed. He also urges students to join Stand With Us, an international and nonpartisan Israel education organization designed to inspire and teach people of all ages and backgrounds, challenging misinformation and fighting anti-Semitism. So, again, she would be open to other speakers on the topic, but not a, 86-year-old actual Holocaust survivor. Mose Spern, president of the United Jewish Teachers, seethed in an email to the Brooklyn district superintendent and aides to the school chancellor that the nixing of the would-be speaker begs a question of, are we now censoring Holocaust survivors for their views of Israel? Spern, the grandson of a Holocaust survivor himself, called the principal's stance appalling, discriminatory, and personally offensive. There are only so many survivors out there who will speak. Yes, who will speak, that are still with us. This is not meeting the moment, Spern said, as the city and nation has been reeling from massive jumps in anti-Semitic attacks in recent years. This is sending a message to Jews in New York City public schools. He pointed to the mob of anti-Israel protesters who recently demonstrated outside the Manhattan Park East Synagogue, uttering vile anti-Israel and anti-Semitic slurs. Just to give you, it's just kind of a quick story, like I said, with no real segue, but to show you not only what we're dealing with in New York. Now this is the city, but remember that's where many of the protests popped up, on the college campuses there, but also in the streets. We saw the synagogue recently with that disgusting display, and now a New York City principal, Aaron Rush, has denied a request for a Holocaust survivor to speak at the schools because she believes he's too pro-Israel. But that for some reason, and spread misinformation about what was actually on his website, and then saying that she'd be welcome to other guest speakers. That's when we talk about the level. That's a middle school, but that's where we're talking about the level of where this anti-Semitism comes from, where it all begins, in the education system. Okay, we've got a lot of breaking stories this morning. Pete Hegseth still in the news, of course. We're going to be talking about the peace plan. Oh, quite a few New York State updates. I don't know if you saw Elise Stefanik. She's battling with Speaker Johnson. So we'll talk about that coming up. And, of course, if you are just waking up, if you are just tuning in, Republican Matt Van Epps defeats, as Trump calls her, the AOC of Tennessee in a close special election. That is the biggest story this morning. We're going to talk about the media and how they're twisting it to make sure that you know Democrats are still going to win in the midterm. And as I said in the 7 o'clock hour, Whey, Jennings. Oh, hey, tomorrow's program, we're going to be talking with our friend Greg Tranter. He was in town recently, and many of you saw the coverage. Many of you attended, which was the unveiling of the historic marker about the first professional football game played at night, which actually happened. It wasn't called Dunn Field at the time, but at Dunn Field in that general area. He's going to tell us how he felt the event went and tell us about the article, his research, and his new book. So that'll be on tomorrow's program. I'm working on a couple things for Friday. Next week's going to be very busy. Don't forget, the telethon is coming up next Friday. We'll tell you all about that later on in the program. I don't want to get too far ahead and run too far behind. We're just getting warmed up, and look how much we already covered. If you're new to the show, you see that number on the bottom of the screen. You can reach out, text at any time to comment about today's topic or leave a voicemail. Feel free to leave a voicemail. All right, let's take a short break. Just getting warmed up. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. It looks a little better out there than yesterday's view. Of course, some beautiful lights all lit up here on Market Street in the heart of the Gafford District. Thank you to Boss Security for bringing us that view. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Again, Republican Matt Van Epps won in that congressional special election in Tennessee. We're going to talk more about it a little bit later on, but that is your breaking story. Yesterday, Michael and Susan Dell pledged to donate a historic $6.25 billion toward funding the Trump accounts, as they're being called, for 25 million American children. The investment, which will equal $250 per account, is meant to help kids pay for an education, start a business, or afford a down payment on a house after they turn 18. I even saw this presented in a negative way, and I can't remember which outlet. I wish I could. But saying something with a caveat of, we're not sure this investment is as good as a standard investment in different forms. This may not be the best form, but you get the free seed money. That's to ignore that. President Trump said the accounts will act as real trust funds for every American child and called the Dell's donation one of the most generous acts in the history of our country. A lot of friends of mine have already told me they're going to contribute a lot of money too, said Trump. The Dell's donation, estimated to be the largest single one ever made to U.S. children, according to Invest America, a nonprofit partnered with the Dells that is helping the U.S. Treasury launch the investment accounts. Now, what we know about it gets a little wonky here, but it's for U.S. citizens born from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2028. The U.S. Treasury will seed these accounts with a federal grant of $1,000. The Dells will need additional accounts for most children aged 10 and under who were born before 2025 with grants of $250 each. Children older than 10 may receive grants as well if leftover funding is available. The donation is expected to cover 25 million American kids in zip codes with a median income of less than $150,000. If there's one investment that never stops growing, it's investing in children. They are our future, said the Dells. What inspired us most was a chance to expand this opportunity to even more children. Now, Michael Dell founded Dell Technologies, as I'm assuming you already were speculating, as a 19-year-old freshman student at the University of Texas. He has a $148.5 billion net worth. Now, the Trump accounts have not yet been launched. Parents will be able to open accounts and start contributing to them as of July 4th, 2024. 6. So there you are. Now, this was originally passed, these Trump accounts passed under the big, beautiful bill, and they're being called Trump accounts. So the president said Trump accounts will be the first, I guess you could say, real trust fund for every American child. That was a major story yesterday. Also, in some breaking news, President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner held a marathon round of Ukraine peace talks yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin, though they ended with a statement from the Kremlin that parts of the proposal remain, quote, unacceptable. The meeting began in Moscow around 7:30 local time and lasted more than 5 hours, ending with no agreement. Putin's aide, Yuri Yuzhkov, told Russia media, while a compromise peace plan for Ukraine has not yet been found, some American proposals for a peace settlement appear more or less acceptable, but they need to be discussed. Some of the formulations we were offered are unacceptable, therefore the work will continue. Putin saying, just ahead of the talks, kind of delivering what you would say a chilling warning to Europe, accusing EU leaders of sabotaging peace talks with the U.S. We are not planning to go to war with Europe, but if Europe wants to and starts, we are ready right now. Putin has criticized the input as direct interference from Europe, stating that European demands are not acceptable to Russia. Witkoff has been to the Kremlin for similar peace talks numerous times, but Tuesday it was the first time he was joined by Trump's son-in-law, who helped the envoy cement the Gaza peace deal. The pair also brought an American translator with them for the discussion, which took place 2 days after talks between American and Ukraine delegations in South Florida. So that's a quick view. Marco Rubio said there seems to be progress towards the Ukraine-Russian peace deal, but did say it's only Putin that can end the war. Telling Sean Hannity yesterday, what we're trying to see, this is, again, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, what we're trying to see is if it's possible to end the war in a way that protects Ukraine's future that both sides could agree to. I think we've made some progress, but we're not there yet. When asked how confident he was in the prospect of peace, Rubio deflected and put the onus on Putin, saying, it's hard to tell about confidence levels on it because ultimately the decisions have to be made in the case of Russia by Putin alone, not his advisors, Putin. Only Putin can end this war on the Russian side. Now, President Trump's special envoy, as I mentioned earlier, presented him with a 19-point peace plan that was hammered out with the Ukrainians last week. Putin's people saying unacceptable. All right. Oh, since we mentioned Marco Rubio, let me also mention this, because there's been a lot of talk about Maduro, and depending on what outlet you go to, Maduro's trying to outlast, I think that's how Drudge Report had the headline, outlast Donald Trump. Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sharply criticized the regime of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Maduro regime is not a legitimate government, Rubio said. What it is a transshipment organization. It allows cocaine and other drugs that are produced in Colombia to be trafficked through Venezuelan territory, and with the cooperation of elements of the regime, are allowed to leave Venezuela on airplanes and ships headed towards the United States. The Trump administration has continued strikes on alleged drug boats near Venezuela and expanded its military presence in the region. The president has authorized a counter-drug mission in the region. The fact that Maduro is upset about it tells you that drugs are coming out of Venezuela. That's a good point. That's one thing you've got to say about Marco Rubio. He has very often a nice way of putting things that makes it very succinct. Excuse me, tongue twisted. That makes it kind of boil it down to that level. And I think that's a very good point, that the president has authorized, meaning Maduro, or excuse me, let me try that again. The president, Trump, has authorized a counter-drug mission in the region. The fact that Maduro is upset about it tells you the drugs are coming out of Venezuela. Rubio has accused the Maduro regime of openly cooperating with the drug dealers, and so the leadership is fueling instability in South America. All right. Now, the former Florida Senator Marco Rubio claimed the problem with Maduro is his habit of failing to honor agreements. If you wanted to make a deal with him, I don't know how you do it. He's broken every deal he's ever made. Maduro has made 5 deals with different parties over the past 10 years and has broken every single one of them. The Secretary of State discussed a failed deal between Joe Biden and the Venezuelan leader. Maduro asked Biden that his nephews, convicted drug traffickers, be released from U.S. prisons. He asked that the chief money launderer be released from U.S. custody before he stood trial. In exchange, he promised to hold free and fair elections. He got the nephews back, the drug dealers, he got the bagman back, and he never did the free and fair elections. They suckered Joe Biden. They're not going to sucker Donald Trump. Another great line from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio saying Trump will not be suckered by Maduro like the Biden administration. All right, on that note, yes, we're going to talk about Pete Hegseth. As I said, if you are just tuning in, Republican Matt Van Epps was victorious in that special election in Tennessee for the 7th District for Congress. That was last night. Big win. The media presenting it as a loss for Republicans somehow. Again, we'll talk about that and anything else you'd like. But we got to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with some of your comments. Keep those waves. I know it's a different time of year. You're all bundled up, perhaps watching. Not as chatty this morning. That's all right. We'll bring you along. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning, Steve. One has to remember that anything that promotes being independent from the government, Democrats will always be against. Democrats depend on people being dependent on services to exist. Just giving enough breadcrumbs to live. Fear tactics still prove to be the biggest motivation to keep people believing Democrats care for them. It is all one big shell game. Ignore the $6 billion of fraud in Minnesota. The mayor and chief of police have said to call the police and report kidnapping when ICE is seen grabbing people. When will people see them for what they are? Nothing more than the promoters for violence and illegalities, as long as they don't get caught or prosecuted. There's actually quite a bit on that, and I'm glad you brought to your attention, Steve. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later on in the show. If we have time, we have so much to talk about, but we have been covering that issue since yesterday. And what I thought was interesting as we talk about the media, I'll jump to the story just real quick. And then I have a comment from a different viewer. I don't want that other viewer to think that I'm ignoring them. But Governor Tim Walz is at the center of a widening scandal as federal prosecutors continue to unravel one of the nation's largest COVID-era fraud cases. And remember, this guy wanted to be, well, not only the alpha male, that's why he was chosen, but wanted to be the vice president of the United States. And you see this fraud, and really why this fraud was allowed to perpetrate is because the group, the scammers, said, well, it's racist that you're not giving us this money when they were first being investigated. Well, of course, that's going to scare someone like Tim Walz, so they no longer looked into it. Continuing what has been, as Steve said, I've heard various numbers, as low as $1 billion, as high as $6 billion. But this is a huge scandal for Tim Walz. But anyone who relies on evening newscasts on ABC, NBC, and CBS for that information would have absolutely no idea. Now, I can give you the background, but the Justice Department announced new charges last week against the 78th defendant in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, with prosecutors saying involved more than $300 million in stolen funds. Like I said, the numbers are changing. Many of the individuals charged come from Minnesota's Somali community, and critics have pointed to Walz. A group of Minnesota state employees said they wrote to former Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democratic National Committee multiple times warning them about Walz and what they described as his incompetence, fraud scandals, and retaliation. In a True Social post on Thanksgiving, I'm not going to use exact language of what Trump called Walz, but he accused the governor of doing nothing either through fear or incompetence. Well, the New York Times published a blistering report on Saturday headlined How Fraud Swamped Minnesota's Social Services System on Tim Walz's Watch, a surprising article to come from the New York Times. They wrote, Walls and fellow Democrats are being asked to explain how so much money was stolen on their watch. However, ABC's World News Tonight, NBC's Nightly News, and CBS's Evening News have not mentioned Walls by name in the past week, according to the search of transcripts. The terms Somali and Somalian were also not used on any of the three network newscasts. They did not immediately respond to a request for comment by Fox News why they decided to skip this major scandal. Newsbusters, a media research organization, referred to it as an omission and accused the networks of suppressing the scandal. Another day, another massive story of blue state political malfeasance hidden by the elitist media Nightly News. This time, there is not a peep about the exploding welfare scandal currently engulfing the state of Minnesota, which directly implicates some of its senior-most elected leaders. This is without a doubt a scandal of massive proportions that continues to unfold, and yet a search of the legacy Nightly News over the past week yields absolutely nothing. Had such allegations of corruption unfolded in, say, Florida, you'd never hear the end of it. But as is often the case with these things, they appear to be different. The double standard wins again. And of course, we've talked about this in the past. We've been talking about it with Biden. I've got an article here that I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to get to, where they're questioning Trump's health again. And even after they released MRI results and results in general, but we saw for 4 years, of course, how you could not even, well, you couldn't find that story about Biden. And if you heard it from a conservative outlet, the mainstream media would criticize a conservative outlet. So we see this double standard, this hypocrisy time and time again, and that's why the mainstream media has lost its credibility. Now, Walls did face questions about the scandal Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press when Kristen Welker pressed him on whether he takes responsibility for failing to stop the fraud in his state. The governor responded, well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. I will know it's not Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. These people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. That was Walls' answer, but otherwise, no mention of this scandal on ABC, NBC, or CBS Evening News. All right, comment from a different viewer. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is accusing Trump of starving people again after she refused to provide her state's SNAP data, and it was announced that New York would have its federal funding pulled. She says, quote, genuine question, why is the Trump administration so hell-bent on people going hungry? Well, it was announced yesterday that U.S. Agriculture, thank you for that comment, by the way, that U.S. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins announced that the U.S. Department of Agriculture would halt federal funding to states that refuse to share their data on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. What they want this information for is to root out fraud, because when you started to see the numbers during the government shutdown and they started looking into it, there is a lot of fraud, a lot of questionable activity, so they're trying to almost doge it, almost root out that corruption. During a cabinet meeting, Rollins highlighted the accomplishments of the USDA and spoke about the fraud the agency had discovered within SNAP. Rollins also shared that in February, states were asked to turn over their data to the federal government to let the USDA partner with them to root out fraud, and that only 29 states had shared that data. So I would ask, why is Kathy Hochul so hell-bent on not rooting out fraud, not cleaning up the books? Rollins saying the third thing, we have so much great things to talk about at the USDA, but the third thing, which became very much a part of the national conversation during the Democratic shutdown, was SNAP reform, food stamp reform. When all of America saw, which so many of us know and have been working on, but when you have so much rampant fraud in a program that 42 million Americans participate in. She continued to share the good news that since President Trump became president, 800,000 of the 42 million Americans have moved off of food stamps. She added that the agency has found 186,000 dead people, Social Security numbers being used, and 500,000 people getting benefits more than twice. In February of this year, we asked for all the states, for the first time, to turn over their data to the federal government to let the USDA partner with them to root out this fraud, to make sure that those who really need food stamps were getting them, but also to ensure that the American taxpayer is protected. 29 states said yes. Not surprisingly, the red states, and that's where all that data, that fraud, comes from. The 21 states, such as California, of course, New York, and Minnesota, blue states refused to share their SNAP data, adding that as of next week, the agency would stop moving federal funds into those states until they comply. Rollins spoke about how 186,000 deceased men and women and children in this country are receiving a check, and pointed out that this is just data from those 29 mostly red states. That's not even the whole country. Can you imagine when we get our hands on the blue state data what we're going to find? So there we are, kind of piggybacking off of that comment. We're going to talk a little bit about Hegseth. If you are just joining us this morning, Republican Matt Van Epps winning in that special election in Tennessee, defeating, as Trump called her, the AOC of Tennessee, Afton Ben. Ben had raised Democrats' hope that there could be an upset. So now the media is trying to spin it, some of the pundits as well, trying to spin it as if it's somehow still a loss for Republicans. It gets a little confusing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. If you are just joining us, 7 o'clock, right around 7:20, we're going to be talking with Whey Jennings, the grandson of Waylon Jennings. So we really look forward to that. He's going to be in Hornell on Sunday, so you're not going to want to miss that. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Very excited. Coming up just about a week. I'm going to put it up on the screen if you would be so kind to donate, because our telethon's coming up. We're going to have great music. We're going to have some special guests. It is going to be fun as always. This will be our third annual. It's hard to believe. And this year, our goal is to raise $6,000. So you can get that money to me now. You can get it to me ahead of time. Please, as a matter of fact, it would actually make it easier, because we have a very generous donor who will match everything we raise here on the telethon up to $6,000. So if you put in 50, it's like you gave 100. You get the idea, right? If you put in 6,000, it's like you put in 12,000. So if you be so inclined, those are a couple of ways. And of course, when it says mail checks to Frank Acom, don't make it out to Frank Acom. Make it out to the Salvation Army of Corning. I didn't think about that until I just read it. But of course, I think that goes without saying. You can just mail it here, but it goes to Salvation Army of Corning, or texting. And we do have our kettle here on the desk. So if you want to stop by, drop it off, or text me and I can meet you somewhere, whatever the case may be. But also, to help out the Salvation Army, and this is separate, but I know people enjoy doing this, that there's going to be that friendly bell ringing campaign between the Corning City Republicans and the Corning City Democrats. This is a yearly tradition, 17th annual competition. It's hard to believe. Each committee will have members of Corning Centerway Square to ring the bell from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. in their annual friendly competition. The two committees are asking the public to come out and show their support by contributing on either Monday or Tuesday. The Democrats will be ringing the bell Monday, and Republicans will be there on Tuesday. And this raises a lot of funds for the Salvation Army of Corning. So that's another way to give. If I'm being selfish, I want you to give the money here, but that's not what it's all about. At the end of the day, it's for, of course, the Salvation Army of Corning, and trust me, the amazing work they do for our community. Okay, back to the action. Again, if you're just joining us, the Republican Matt Van Epps did defeat Afton Ben, the Democrat, in that special election for Tennessee's 7th District House seat. All right, Trump and Hegseth insist that they didn't know of the follow-up strike that killed survivors on the suspected drug boat. This, your thoughts on this, because I don't really want to dive too much into it. I know Senator Mark Kelly is making hay out of this. I mean, he is saying some very nasty things about Pete Hegseth. We'll talk about that quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this because right now, as it stands, both Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have said that they did not, or they're distancing themselves, if you want it to sound biased, like this article, from the decision to launch a follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean, insisting they weren't aware of what the military had done after the first strike didn't kill everyone on board. During a cabinet meeting, the president said, "I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about the people. I wasn't involved, and I knew they took out a boat. But I would say this, they had a strike." Trump added that he was relying on Pete Hegseth to keep him apprised of the situation, and that Hegseth was satisfied with the September attack. But Hegseth on Tuesday also denied any direct role in targeting the survivors, saying he'd empowered Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley to make all of the operational decisions and had left the room well before it became clear that some of the people on the boat had survived. Hegseth saying, "I watched the first strike live. I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hour, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting." The defense secretary did not learn about the second strike, he added, until hours later. Both Trump and Hegseth defended Bradley's actions as correct and was in the administration's legal authority, with Hegseth, vowing that the administration would have his back. President Trump has empowered commanders to do what is necessary, which is dark and difficult things in the dead of the night, Hegseth added. He also made it clear that we have only just begun striking narco boats. We've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people, Hegseth said. Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over a community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned, and President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations. And we mentioned what Marco Rubio had said earlier about specifically about Maduro, and I thought it was such a good point. There's a reason why Maduro is so upset about these launches. Now, it says here, according to NPR, so take it with a grain of salt, there have been 21 strikes on suspected drug boats as of November the 15th. Hegseth saying we've had a bit of pause because it's hard to find boats to strike right now, which is the entire point. Deterrence has to matter, not arrest and hand over and then do it again, the rinse and repeat approach of the previous administration. This is meant to get after that approach. He reaffirmed his support for the commanders who made judgment calls during such strikes after the White House said Monday that Admiral Frank Bradley worked well within his authority and the law during these strikes. As President Trump always has our back, we'll always have the back of our commanders who are making decisions in difficult situations, and we do this in case in all these strikes they're making judgment calls and ensuring that they defend the American people. They've done the right thing. We'll keep doing that, and we have their back, said Hegseth. Now, Senator Mark Kelly, stepped it up, saying that Pete Hegseth is like a 12-year-old playing Army. He said that President Trump has a play of bullying his opponents into silence and railing against Hegseth as unqualified. This guy is so unqualified for the job, said Senator Kelly. I mean, think about this. He runs around on a stage talking about lethality and warrior ethos and killing people. We have the most competent, capable military this planet has ever seen by far. That's not the message that needs to come from the Secretary of Defense. He makes it a point not to call him Secretary of War. Instead, he's running around on stage like he's a 12-year-old playing Army. And it is ridiculous. It is embarrassing. And I can't imagine what our allies think of looking at this guy in this job. One of the most important jobs in our country. Kelly's video on refusing illegal orders came just days before reports that the U.S. military under Hegseth ordered the killing of the survivors, et cetera, et cetera. Now you do have, as is the case, some Republicans turning. Now, a lot of times it's the kind of the frequent flyers, if you will, the people that you can expect to be critical in the Republican Party. It's just kind of a tradition in the Republican Party to turn on your fellow Republicans. We're going to talk about that now. Yeah, like I said, we're not going to talk too much about this because we've yet to really take an in-depth look at that Republican victory in Tennessee yesterday. That was a big win. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then just a quick thing about Hegseth here, and then a couple other breaking stories from yesterday. That's the kind of day it is with all the breaking stories. So stay with us. We got to take a break. You may have heard the corning whistle. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. Again, our beautiful view of historic Market Street brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Oh my goodness, look at all of these comments. All right, let's go to comments for a second. Okay, where was Senator Mark Kelly when Obama was dropping bombs on weddings and funerals in the Middle East? They're about 10,000 miles away from us. These people are less than 1,000 bringing drugs into America. Not to mention, fentanyl has killed more people in 1 year than 10 years of Vietnam. If the boat was still in the water and the product was still on there, it's a legal strike. The survivors are irrelevant. 3 legal scholars have said the same thing I just said above. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Morning. Well, good morning. Whatever happened to the Democrat slogan, joy is resistance? Okay, Democrat-run blue states who refuse to root out SNAP fraud, enjoy the joy that your resistance gives you, and enjoy the consequential lack of federal funds. Boo-hoo, have fun with that. No wonder that blue states have the highest tax rates. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Kelly is military, Senator Mark Kelly, and should be dealt with as such. He is way out of his league. Thank you. Mark writes in, could be that Hochul is not giving SNAP data because her illegal voters will be brought out and she can't stand to lose votes as Elise Stefanik is narrowing down on her. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. I see some other comments that I just didn't get to before break. We'll get to them in the next segment. Again, if you're just joining us, Republican Matt Van Epps, defeats Afton Ben in that special election in Tennessee. All right, so as I mentioned, Republicans turning on Republicans. Top Republicans going against Hegseth and demand the video of the boat strike. Now, it's some of the names, it's not going to surprise you. Senator Thom Tillis said he was still trying to understand whether Hegseth had ordered the second strike that day, killing a couple of survivors that clung to the wreckage. Obviously, if it can be substantiated by facts, it's a violation of both ethical and possible legal requirements. If it is substantiated, whoever made that order needs to get the, we'll say, heck out of Washington. Lindsey Graham said he was still working out the facts, but suggested that the attack could have run afoul of the law, saying it's a long-held rule that survivors of the ship attack are no longer combatants, and an air crew member in a parachute is no longer combatant. You're out of the fight. I don't know what the facts are, but that's general law. We'll see what the facts are. Who else do they have? They go. This is the perfect one when Don Bacon. Yeah, I know. I felt that way under Signalgate, meaning he thinks Hegseth should have been forced out of government a long time ago. I've seen enough that I don't think he's the right leader. Republicans making names for themselves by bad-mouthing fellow Republicans. As a matter of fact, Rachel Maddow predicts that Republican lawmakers will ask Pete Hegseth to resign because of a report alleging impropriety over his handling of a drug boat strike. Quote, I don't understand why we're going to war with Venezuela. I'm not sure the administration has even bothered to try to come up with anything, even internally coherent. So what are we doing there in the first place? Why are we blowing out of the water and killing people in boats with outboard motors, some of which aren't even pointed towards the United States, let alone verified to have drugs on them? It's a weird situation where so many, and you expect it from Rachel Maddow, right? But where they're essentially defending the drug dealers or acting as if, and probably maybe in their cushy world, they haven't had their lives upended like that gentleman, or viewer, I should say, who sent in about fentanyl killing more people than 10 years of Vietnam in 1 year. It's a catastrophe, she said. I think Pete Hegseth, it's impossible to imagine that he survives this as Secretary of Defense. I think he must resign, and I think Republicans will ask for that ultimately once they investigate this. All right. Enough on that, unless you want to talk more about it. But we've got other topics to discuss. Stay with us. We still have some New York State issues, too. I just feel like we're moving along on a lot of topics this morning. And at a time when historically, kind of December, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, not historically big days for news in the sense of a lot of reporters and journalists are on vacation. So you don't always get as many breaking stories, but not under the Trump administration. Trump celebrates as Republican Matt Van Epps defeats AOC of Tennessee, as he calls her, in a close congressional special election. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, getting ready to wrap up hour number one. Ken writes in, let's see what the legacy media talking point will be today. when several blue states vote blue and it was a referendum on Trump. Now they will say a purple state that recently turned mostly red elected a Republican, and it's another sign that the upcoming midterms are going to be a blue wave. I bet the propaganda makes the sheeple baa in approval. That you're exactly right, Ken. And I mentioned at the top of the show that when a Republican wins, it's still a loss. And CNN was a prime example of that. They'll use loaded language like survives an upset, still has implications for the midterm. They downplay it now when the last few weeks they were suggesting, because they thought they had a chance, that this was going to be the complete sign that Democrats were going to just be dominant in the midterms. So yes, you're spot on with that. They are twisting it. We're going to talk about it at the top of the next hour. I just want to mention this quickly as we wrap up. Foreign nationals from more than 24 countries could be barred from entering the United States under an expanded travel ban being considered by President Trump. The Trump administration is targeting at least 30 countries to include on an updated travel ban that could add more in the future Quote, "We will be announcing the list soon," said a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson. Kristi Noem teased the full travel ban on Monday night, indicating on X that she proposed expanding the number of countries on the restricted list during a meeting with Trump. She recommended including every darn country that's been flooding our nation with killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies on the list. And I talked about that all yesterday, but we could see an expanded travel ban of up to 30 countries. Could expand to 30 countries after the D.C. National Guard shooting, and that list is coming soon. All right, hour number one in the books. When we come back, we are going to talk about that election. Just to your point, Ken, and we'll talk about it in the next hour. Republicans avoid a nightmare in Tennessee. Their electoral picture is still scary. All right. We also have a couple things here about the media. I hope I can get to it. Elise Stefanik going after House Speaker Johnson. Also signing a discharge petition forcing a vote on banning stock trading for members of Congress. So I'm going to tell you about that statement from her. And then, oh my goodness, I forgot about the energy. There's two really good pieces about energy policy in New York State and the failure thereof. Hopefully we can get to all that and much more. Whew, I feel like we've covered so much. I should have slowed down a little bit here. Maybe we will be out of things to talk about. Stay with us. Hour number one in the books. Hour number two, moments away. In that next hour, we'll be talking with Whey Jennings, the grandson of Waylon Jennings. He's going to be in the area on Sunday in Hornell. We'll tell you all about that coming up in the 7 o'clock hour. As I mentioned, on tomorrow's broadcast, we'll be talking with our friend Greg Tranter. He was in town to unveil his historic marker. We'll talk a little bit about that, talk about future plans, the history of the first night football game professional football game played in Elmira. That was what the historic marker was about. You'll hear all about that, but that'll be on tomorrow's broadcast. And then, again, mark your calendar, December 12th for the Salvation Army Telethon. There we go. There's our housekeeping. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome to hour number two of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live and proudly from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Why are people, even some Republicans, supporting drug runners coming to the USA? Money? Thank you. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Senator Kelly compares the Secretary of War to a child, but his view is dangerously childish. Gently arrest dangerous criminals, send them through our never hold anyone accountable judicial system, then cut them loose so they can poison Americans. Perfect. Thank you very much for that comment. So yesterday, and we're going to show you the media spin on this, Trump celebrating that win. Republican Matt Van Apps narrowly defeated Democrat Afton Ben in the hotly contested special election for Tennessee's 7th District House seat. As of last night, the Associated Press called the race at 9:37 p.m., and Van Apps led by about 6 percentage points with 85% of the ballots. They gave their speeches. They gave their concession speech. Trump posting on Truth Social, congratulations to Matt Van Epps on his big congressional win in the great state of Tennessee. The radical left Democrats threw everything at him, including millions of dollars. Another great night for the Republican Party. President Donald J. Trump. So the media's putting their spin on it, which is, well, first of all, and I think someone had a good point. You should probably not hate the area that will be a part of your district. I mean, she admitted that she hated Nashville. She hated country music. But anyway, CNN says Republican Matt Epps will win Tennessee special election, averting a Democrat upset. His win over Democrat Afton Benn allows the GOP to retain the seat previously held by former Representative Mark Green, who resigned in July to take a private sector job. Preventing an upset, but emboldening Democrats as they were on track to overperform in a normally deep red district. So now you have a scenario where overperforming is the biggest indicator of what is going to happen in the midterms. Not a win. A win is, or a loss in this case, is a win for them, and a win is a loss for Republicans. It's amazing, and you know they had this all worked up ahead of time. They were prepared on both sides of the ball, that if the Democrat did win, that the midterms are all over. If the Democrat lost, which ultimately happened, they already had the spin that it was still a huge night for Democrats in a deep red district. And that even though even the fact that she outperformed is a huge sign of things to come in the midterms. Republicans had increasingly feared what would have been a disastrous loss in a district President Trump won by 22 percentage points just 13 months ago. While Democrats notched big wins in the Virginia and New Jersey governor's race last month, a flip in Republican-led Tennessee would have been a much more shocking victory. That's why, of course, they were hoping that was going to be their headline, more shocking victory. Democrats, including Ben, argue that even a narrow loss would show momentum for the party's focus on cost of living issues. Van Epps was on track to win the district by a much narrower margin than Trump and Green did last year. Ben saying, tonight is not the final result of what we wanted, but it is the beginning of something so powerful in Tennessee and across the South. Before the race was called, Ben told CNN, this is a testament that Democrats can compete in high turnout elections because we're seeing a hyper high turnout right now in a special election. It portends what will happen next year when you have Republicans that are in more competitive seats, struggling with candidates that look a lot like me. And for me, that's a really exciting moment. Turnout in the race rivaled the 2022 midterm election and is more than half of what it was in 2024, the largest share in a special election this year. That's especially remarkable given this election was a one-off on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. That increase in turnout could account for why the Democrat overperformed and was below the 16-point average of other special elections this year. But Ben still improved from the Democrats' 2024 margins in the district by double digits. Boy, the whole piece is about her, huh? Democrat-aligned House Majority PAC said tonight's results make it clear no House Republicans' re-election should be considered safe next November. Van Epps, a former Army helicopter pilot, previously served as the commissioner of the Tennessee Department of General Services. He won the Republican primary in October with endorsements from Trump and Governor Bill Lee. House Speaker Mike Johnson hit the campaign trail. We talked about that yesterday. So the idea here, according to Aaron Blake from CNN, and we're not going to talk a ton about this, but because I have other media things to talk about as well. We've got New York State issues that we cannot avoid. But Republicans avoided disaster on Tuesday night by winning a special election in a solidly red Tennessee congressional district. That is not a headline or the lead that you would ever hear if it was a Democrat. Democrats avoid disaster on Tuesday night by winning a special election in a solidly blue Tennessee congressional district. They're never going to present a Democrat win as a loss. It's just not going to happen. The single-digit race is merely the latest in an unambiguously troubling series of recent election results for President Donald Trump's party, 11 months before the 2026 midterm elections. Republican Representative-elect Matt Van Epps led Democrat Afton Benn by about 9 points with 95% of the vote counted. That's a district that Trump carried by 22 points, and former GOP rep Mark Green won by more than 21 points last year. That means that, as things stand, Ben overperformed Democrats' 2024 presidential margin by about 13 points and their 2024 House margin by about 12 points. The swing is actually smaller than the other U.S. House special elections this year. Before Tuesday's race, Democrats had overperformed Kamala Harris's margin by an average of 18 points and their House margins by an average of 16 points in 4 special congressional elections held in 3 states, Arizona, Florida, and Virginia. The sum total of those 2025 races is pretty remarkable. Democrats have now overperformed by double digits in every special election for the House held in 2025. And this year's special election account for 5 of their 15 biggest ever performances since Trump first became president. Wow, they're jumping in the weeds on this to really sell this as a win for Democrats. Special elections are, of course, an imperfect and infrequent gauge of upcoming elections. They tend to feature very low turnout, which places a premium on enthusiasm and can create larger swings than normal. Turnout in Tuesday's contest actually rivaled the 2022 midterm election in the district, which could account for why Ben's overperformance was below the average of the other special elections this year. Can you follow this? Even if Democrats had somehow won this district, there's very little chance they'd have held it even in a strong 2026 election for their side. But virtually every other indicator had also pointed in Democrats' direction this year. One fair question for Democrats. Given the smaller, they're going to ask one, okay. Given the smaller overperformance is whether they failed to fully take advantage of the environment by running a quiet liberal candidate in Bain, or a quite liberal. I thought I said quiet. I'm like, I'm missing out something. She gave Republicans plenty of material with her past comments, which included saying she hates Nashville, expressing support for defunding the police, and calling herself a very radical person. So that's the question, should you put somebody forth that's so radical? Now that gets confusing because it wasn't Mom Donnie, now the bellwether, that you need far left liberals, AOCs of Tennessee, for instance, like Trump called Ben. You can't keep this straight. So now it's don't go quite. By the way, I like that they say quite liberal. I mean, you're talking far left liberal. You're talking AOC supported candidate. The bias in these articles just reek. But with a 2025 soon coming to a close, all told, Democrats appear to be performing better electorally than they did in 2017, and Democrats went on in 2018 to win back the U.S. House in a wave election. That doesn't mean a midterm victory is assured. 11 months is a long time. But history shows the president's party very often loses seats in midterm elections, and Trump right now appears to be at a low point of either of his presidential terms. Tuesday's results filled out that picture, even if Democrats fell well shy of a shock upset. So well shy of a shock upset. Can we, maybe I shouldn't overanalyze this, but do we have to have the message in every single piece that, the president's that's in power normally loses seats. His party normally loses seats in the midterm. Don't we all know that fact by now? I guess probably not. That's assuming a little too much from some of the people that just go and watch, their stories and maybe the nightly news. Are we going to go to New York State next? Boy, there's a good piece. I'm not guaranteed to get to this. So I just want to mention it, kind of piggyback on these two articles. The first article is by Garrett Graff, and it says, it's time to talk about Donald Trump's health again. The most consequential topic in the world is a simple question. Is the president mentally fit to serve? I'm sure that, quote, simple question was not asked in the 4 years until the debate performance of President Joe Biden. Now it's every day we have a new story. I don't want to get into what they say, but the reason why I mention it is there's a piece by Jonathan Alpert, and it's at the New York Post this morning. And it's titled, I asked if Trump derangement syndrome is real. I got the death threats in reply, proving it is. Last month when I published a column asking, is Trump derangement syndrome real? In the Wall Street Journal, I expected it to spark likely and lively debate. I didn't anticipate a live demonstration of the very pathology I described. My column outlined a pattern I see in my psychotherapy practice every day. It's called obsessive political preoccupation, a presentation that resembles an obsessive-compulsive pattern in which one political figure becomes the center of intrusive thoughts, heightened arousal, and compulsive monitoring that takes over a person's mental bandwidth. TDS is not an actual diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I made that clear in my article. But patients tell me about political thoughts that hijack their day, sleepless nights, irritability, anger, and anxiety that spills into work and relationships. One woman said she couldn't enjoy family vacation because, quote, it felt wrong to relax while Trump was still out there. Wow. I see marriages strained, friendships fractured, and daily functioning disrupted by the mere mention of Donald Trump. For many, their anxiety has outgrown politics and become a way of operating in the world, shaping every reaction before they even realize it. As soon as my column was posted online, the response illustrated my point with almost clinical precision. Many of the loudest critics merely reacted to my use of the term TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, not to my explanation. The retort immediate and emotional, displaying the very pattern I described: impulsive, catastrophic thinking driven by feeling rather than by reflection. In trying to disprove the phenomenon, they demonstrated it dramatically. 2 days later, I discussed the piece live on Fox News, and the reaction intensified. The segment was calm and clinical, but once again, the clips hit social media. They were stripped of context, paired with heated captions, and fed into the outrage feeds. The surge of emotional messages I received was immediate and relentless. Some accused me of defending a fascist. I don't want to go through all that because I got to be careful. Several messages, including voicemails, wished me dead. These weren't fringe accounts, but people who publicly describe themselves as compassionate, trauma-informed, or dedicated to mental health work. Their reaction is exactly what concerns me as a clinician. My op-ed warned that emotional reasoning dominates much of our political culture. Disagreement is treated as cruelty. Discomfort is treated as danger. When people fuse their identity to their political emotions, challenging those emotions feels like an attack on the self. And this pattern appears across the political spectrum. The critics who condemned the piece reenacted the pattern in real time. Their outrage became their evidence. Their feelings became their argument. They proved my point more clearly than anything I could have written, and that's why we need to talk about these symptoms openly. Our society encourages people to trust their trust, to follow every impulse, and to label ordinary discomfort as harm. Too many in my profession have encouraged this view. They now celebrate it when directed at the right targets. I see the consequences daily, as a patient tells me she stopped speaking to her father because he voted the wrong way, or a couple avoids family gatherings because a relative supports Trump. These are educated adults who have adopted the idea that emotional discomfort equals danger. The backlash I experienced clarified the consequences. When people show hostility to the point of threatening death the moment their feelings are activated, we're no longer dealing with political disagreement, but with a profound emotional problem that affects far more than elections. We need to relearn how to tolerate emotional discomfort. Feeling challenged doesn't mean you're in danger, and never gives you permission to threaten or defame people who see the world differently. We also need to separate people from their politics. Your uncle is not a villain because he supports Trump's policies, and your cousin is not immoral because she votes Democrat. Finally, we need to restore resilience. Therapy is supposed to help people regulate their emotion and challenge distorted thinking. Instead, the language of therapy has drifted into political life and is being used to justify emotional overreactions and excuse impulsive behavior. These last few weeks made it obvious. TDS isn't a niche reaction, but part of a national pattern that's changing how people think, behave, and relate to their own families. If we can't separate emotion from interpretation, the chaos will continue. The real emergency isn't in Washington, it's the way Americans are thinking. I thought that was a really important piece by Jonathan Alpert, and I'm sorry to read the whole thing like that. I don't like to do that, but I thought that was really very interesting and ties in with what we talk about very often in the media. We talk about some of these protests in the street, but we have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll start talking about some New York State issues. Then we have Whey Jennings coming on the program. He's Waylon Jennings' grandson. I think you're going to really enjoy that. So stay with us. We'll be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments because we've got Whey Jennings coming up. After Whey Jennings, we have 2 updates on Elise Stefanik, and then, boy, they're blasting Governor Hochul in a great way about the affordability crisis, that they are just eviscerating her at the Post, but also some Democrat-leaning groups as well because of the energy policies. We'll talk about that after Whey Jennings. But first, we have just enough time for all these great comments from viewers. Just an observation, says this viewer. I have often wondered why the fake news is so anti-American and so on. Given this fact, I wonder what would be found in those reporters' backgrounds should such be done. A lot of it would be quote-unquote journalism school. I know we've talked about this in the past on the program, but a lot of it would be what they're taught. It's like I've mentioned before, there is nothing perhaps more important, nothing more to strive for than a Woodward and Bernstein moment to bring down a sitting Republican president. So they're taught to kind of idolize that mindset, and that means bringing them down at any cost. So a lot of the background just comes from, just like we talked about education in general. We kicked off the program this morning with a New York City principal that will not allow a Holocaust survivor to speak at their school because of his position on Israel. And so we talked about that anti-Semitism being taught at such a young level. In this case, it's just that kind of hatred is taught from at least the college years once you try to go to journalism school. Comment from a different viewer. Democrats are saying they are lowering the cost of living. Have they forgotten that they are responsible for the high cost of living? They're hoping that you weren't paying attention, is what it is. They are hoping that you weren't paying attention to the inflation caused by the outrageous spending by Biden. And so they're running on, and Mom Donnie did it, they're running on this idea of affordability. Comment from a different viewer. You got to remember the Republicans did pretty well in New Jersey and other places just a month ago. They made serious gains. So you could argue the same for those elections in solid blue areas. Absolutely you could. That's why it's so comical to see the coverage of it presented in a way that this is still a historic win. Even in a loss, it's a historic win for Democrats. It's amazing how that works. And you analyzed it perfect. Not to look at the other races and see how they presented their agenda in those articles. Comment from a different viewer. Wait till his economy policies kick in. And when the economy starts doing even better, the Democrats' narratives will be down the tubes. Thank you. Comment from a different viewer. After watching a dementia-ridden criminal in 4 years, now they say the president is crazy? Unbelievable. Yes, that is in reference. Oh, I think I read that wrong. Now they say the president is nuts. Sorry. Unbelievable. Sometimes I get ahead of myself. The piece is called "It's Time to Talk About Donald Trump's Health Again." The most consequential topic in the world is a simple question: is the president mentally fit to serve? Back in September, after Donald Trump disappeared from view for days and the internet wild with rumors he was dead or hospitalized, I wrote about how the press needed to be leading a more serious conversation about Trump's health and fitness for the presidency than it was having. Yes, because of one thing we know, Trump has been really handled with kid gloves by the media. They just don't report on him enough and try to be negative towards him enough. So already the thesis, the idea coming from Mr. Graff is laughable at face value. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Yes, it's a chilly one. Thank you. Good morning. It's just so disgusting that they want to talk about Trump's health when they turned a blind eye for 4 years and it's all been forgotten. We don't talk about it anymore. Deflect. Yes, I mean, that's why Jake Tapper's book was very remarkable, because it highlighted, and he didn't mean it to do this, but it highlighted the bias in the media, and it highlighted this idea that there were serious quote-unquote reporters that were covering up this fact. I still think it's one of the biggest scandals in American history, really, for that matter. So to now see all this quote-unquote coverage and suggest the media isn't doing enough is very, very laughable. That does it for our comment section for now. Keep them coming in, because when we come back, we've got Whey Jennings. He's the grandson of Waylon Jennings. He's going to be in Hornell, a very special holiday concert this Sunday. You're going to learn all about it coming up next. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking, WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Root Pan, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and in that virtual studio, it's Whey Jennings. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You bet, man. Thank you for having me.
This sounds like kind of an interesting, maybe departure. Correct me if I'm wrong, from something that you may normally do, and it's a holiday concert. Are you typical in holiday concerts?
Well, it's a concert we're doing during the holidays.
Okay.
It's a Whey Jennings concert.
Oh.
That's what it is.
Oh, okay. So it's because I saw you probably 2 years ago in Tioga, Pennsylvania, and so it's a great show. But you will be doing one song with the Hornell High School Choir, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Did they get the pick or did you pick?
I think they picked it, but I'm glad they picked the one they picked.
Oh, okay.
We're singing Hallelujah together. So.
Oh, that's a great one. Oh, how perfect. Do you have to arrive early to practice with them, or are they going to be all ready?
Yeah, I was kind of planning on it. Yeah. I'd like to go through it at least once before we do it.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's a typical Whey Jennings concert. What is a typical Whey Jennings concert?
Well, it's a family fun friendly, kind of concert, but it's kind of upbeat. There's all kinds of different things that happen during my concert. Play a little bit of my grandfather's music, play a lot of my own music. We're gonna party. We're gonna praise God. We're gonna sing some love songs. We're just gonna have an enjoyable experience. Is what we're gonna do.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Now, when you mentioned your grandfather, what's it like, kind of living with that legacy? Do people have different expectations for you?
Well, yeah, but it's just I'm gonna be who I'm gonna be, man. I try to be myself, pretty much.
Yeah. Did you know that you always wanted to get into music?
No, I didn't. Well, I did when I was a young kid. Whenever I was a young kid, I ran out on stage with my grandfather. It was the funnest experience of my childhood. But right about in the teenage years, I went out there and froze like a deer in the headlights. So I changed my route at that point.
Yeah.
I just decided I was going to go work on a cotton farm. So.
Wow. Well, that's completely different.
Yeah. I did that for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. Then I decided to throw my hat in the ring in music. And it's been a rough ride, but it's been pretty good and fruitful here lately.
Yeah, that's great. Do you enjoy the touring aspect?
I do enjoy touring. I've always enjoyed the touring. These days I'm trying to keep like a fine balance between, career and family. So
sure.
It's a little bit more expensive traveling these days, so I try to get right back home to my family, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And again, the concert is Hornell for the holidays. Concert Sunday, December 7th at 2 p.m. So obviously you mentioned your grandfather. What music did you listen to growing up?
I listened to all kinds of music growing up. My parents had extensive record collections, so I listened to everything from Leonard Skinner, Guns N' Roses, all the way up to, Waylon, Merle, and Willie.
Yeah.
And everything in between, and then when I got into about high school, we started listening to absolutely everything. It's shock culture in high school. It's like all the music hits you at once from all directions.
Yeah.
So I've been influenced by all of it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And when you look back at it, for someone that hasn't seen one of your shows, what would you say your heaviest influence is when you perform your own songs?
I'd say a little bit of all of them, honestly. I mean, of course, my grandfather had a huge effect on my music career and songwriting, but I usually just try to hone in what I'm feeling at the time and do my own thing, try to make it my own. I don't really listen to the radio a lot just because I don't want to steal people's ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get in there and I pretty much write poetry and then kind of put music to it after that. So.
Do you have a favorite song that you perform?
Favorite song that I perform? Probably Hallelujah, because it's really brought my children together, and it was just a song that's had a huge impact on my life because I started doing it right when I got sober and right when I'd given my life to God, and it's just people love hearing that song, and it's just I love performing that song. So.
And I mean, this sounds kind of like a naive question, but how important is your Christian walk in your day-to-day life?
Oh, more important than anything, anybody who knows me knows that it's God, family, country, and in that order, So it's you got to put God first in everything you do, because if you don't, it's just going to fall apart, And a lot of people look at life and they're like, how can you put your faith in front of your family? Because I'm like, without your faith, you have no family,
right? That's a perfect way to
put it in that order.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this comes from, and you mentioned it a little bit, your background, having went through some bumpy rides, right? That you overcame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was addicted to drugs for about 27 years, and I did everything you get your hands on, And I met my wife probably about 6 years ago, and I felt like I had lost her because I, was doing the same old me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. I decided at that point it was probably a good time for me to listen to my manager and just go to rehab and get everything put back in order.
Hmm.
And I was given two choices when I did that. They said you can go through regular rehab or you can go through a faith based rehab. And I've wrestled with God my whole life. I mean, my mom always had an open Bible in our house, and I'd read at it, and I read at it for different reasons throughout the year. And a lot of times I'd read at it to prove it wrong,
Hmm.
and there just wasn't no proving it wrong.
No.
So I chose the faith based path, and I've had a good relationship with God ever since.
That's amazing. How important getting through this was music to you as well to start diving into this career?
Well, it's very important, because I guess music has been very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Like, I call it my own therapy.
Yeah.
It's because it's really a way for me to talk to myself without looking like I'm crazy. But I write down the way I feel on the way I feel on paper. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I like to get with other people who also write music and we're like-minded, and we bounce ideas off each other, and we come up with some really good stuff most of the time.
And that's what I'm going to ask, because not that long ago, I interviewed Bill Anderson, right? Whispering Bill Anderson. And it's so interesting to hear the different perspectives, the different processes that people have when they're writing their own music. Not everybody does it the same.
No, music can come about in so many different ways. Like it come from poetry in the music. It can come from music in the words.
Mhm.
It could come from just a thought you have. The thing about it is, how many songs have just been lost in the wind
Yeah.
because somebody forgot to write them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a song is a thought put to music.
Yeah.
Pretty much what it is. It's like, this is what I'm going through right now, and this is what I'm going to write down. And sometimes this is what I'm going through, and this is what I forgot to write down. It's just
Yeah.
it just depends.
Yeah. Do you carry like a notebook on you so you don't forget?
Well, I used to. These days, I just type it up in my phone usually.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing I like to do is just walk in with a blank sheet of paper with people and just come up with some. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I want to write about, and then we start from that and move forward, because what they're feeling and what they feel towards what I'm feeling usually turns into something completely different than what either one of us is feeling, and it just turns into something great.
That's wonderful. Now, what kind of projects are you working on next?
I want to do a really upbeat, fun album next. I want to do. You remember how Toby Keith used to just put out them really upbeat, cool,
Yeah.
funny albums?
Yeah.
Because I remember something he said back in the day that was it hit me. You know what I mean? It's like, I spend all my time writing all of these deep songs and all this, just pouring my heart into this art, and then my biggest song of my career is Red Solo Cup.
It's true.
I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, man. It's usually the fun songs that are just, come out of nowhere. Like, that can be said for my career too. I mean, to this day, the video that has the most views of mine on YouTube is a song called Caught Up. And it's just a funny song about a relationship.
Yeah. Well, that'd be great.
That's what I want to do with my next album. This one I'm putting out right now,
Mhm.
it'll actually be released in March. It's pretty deep. I went deep in every aspect of my life, and I put out probably the most vulnerable album I've ever put out. Is going to be coming up in March. But the one I'm about to start writing is just going to be a bunch of fun songs. Hopefully, I mean, that's the aim.
That's the goal. Is it difficult? You mentioned the word vulnerable. Is it difficult to release something like that? Is it almost becomes too personal for you?
Yeah, it really has, man. It's been really nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because when you're discussing your faith and you're discussing, how you feel about your life and how you feel about, all these different aspects of life, there's a few songs on this album that I'm like, are people going to look at me different? You know what I mean? Because I put out a lot of party and rocking songs back in the day, and I built a pretty good fan base on it,
Yeah.
Like you can find very little of my grandfather in this new album.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
And a lot of people come to see me want to hear my grandfather,
Sure.
And I get that because, my grandfather's Waylon Jennings. Who wouldn't want to hear that?
Right.
But this time they're going to hear me,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that's okay.
How long does a project like that take?
From writing to fruition, I'm still not through with it, honestly. I've gotten all the album done. The album's done, but all the videos, half of them ain't shot yet. It takes quite a while. I started writing this album probably beginning of last year.
Oh, wow.
But, it's like you got to go through different writing writing meetings with different people, whoever you want to write with. You got to come up with. You don't want to rush it for sure. You know,
Sure.
that's one thing you definitely don't want to do. You don't want to rush through something and just put anything out there. You know, so the process, depending on how long it takes to write the song and how okay you're with it. If you're anything like me, and it has to be 100% perfect
Yeah.
before you want to put it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you put it out, it still ain't
And
100%
then
perfect.
you don't like it?
It's like, you know.
Yeah.
But it takes a while.
How difficult is it in today's climate to promote your music? I mean, I know social media has kind of run rampant. Does that make it easier? Does that more difficult?
Well, you know, it all comes down to the dollar, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, once you realize that, you stop worrying about stuff like that because, you know, you're not going to be able to compete with like Morgan Wallen.
Right,
You know,
right,
you're
right.
not going to be able to compete with like Post Malone, Jelly Roll, and all that, unless, you know, something happens that, you know, a big record label wants to get on board and wants to do something with it. When you're independent like me, you're really trying to feed your fan base and you're trying to feed the people who get a hold of it organically. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
is me, and I've put everything I can into it, and hopefully if you enjoy it and you like what you're hearing, that you'll pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because promotion these days is like throwing it out into a sea of music.
That's
You
what I
know, it's
mean.
like,
Yeah.
there's so many songs put on Spotify a day. There's so many YouTube videos
Yeah.
thrown up a day, and you know, if anybody knows who you are and what you stand for and the songs you're about to put out, they'll keep up with you. But as far as trying to, you know, put it out there to the masses, there's one thing people don't understand is like a lot of people think that if you post something on Facebook, the whole world sees it.
Sure.
That's not the case.
No, no.
It all comes down to the mighty dollar. How much you put into it, how much you put into production, how much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just comes down to what you can do by yourself, usually.
The Whey Jennings concert is going to be on December 7th at 2 p.m., and that's at the Hornell High School. And as we said, one song will be done with the Hornell Band. And afterwards, I understand there's a meet and greet. What does that entail?
Yeah, I'm gonna meet everybody at the merch booth after the show. Last thing I say in the show is like, you don't have to buy anything, but I'll meet you over at the merch booth. I'd like to shake your hand.
Oh, that's
you know what I mean? And I stand over there and I talk to everybody as long as they want to talk. And when everybody's done, I go home.
Yeah. So you probably do you get sick of answering the same questions over and over?
No,
No.
because you know, obviously they don't have the answer yet, so I'll give it to them.
Right. And it's not working in a cotton field, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So-
I mean, I thank God for what I get to do and for the people who allow me to do it. So
Yeah.
I don't mind talking to people at all. Man.
Before we go, where's the best place to find out more about your career, your album coming out in March and the like?
Well, all the social media that I have, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those. I have a website. It's wheyjennings.com.
Okay.
All my tour schedules are on there. A bunch of my videos are on there. You can get just about any information you want off of there.
Okay.
Other than that, just find my tour schedule and meet me at the shows.
Perfect. Well, thanks for giving us so much time, and I hope that you enjoy your time in Hornell for the holidays.
Yeah, man.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam. Brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We have a lot of comments coming in as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. I just have Ken's right now. I didn't get a chance to copy the other ones. We'll read the other ones here in just a little bit. Ken writes in, I thought I would write the headline for the legacy media. The Democrat candidate that openly hated a major city that she would be representing lost by less than 10 points. Imagining how well the Democrats will do in the midterms if they pretend to like the areas they will be representing. That's kind of what that one piece almost sounded like. All right, we got to talk some New York State issues. Thanks again to Whey Jennings for being on the program this morning. It was nice to talk with him. That'll be an amazing show on Sunday in Hornell. Okay, Elise Stefanik has accused House Speaker Mike Johnson of blocking one of her initiatives in an intra-party spat Tuesday. This is now threatening Congress's defense package. Stefanik accused Johnson of blocking a measure out of the National Defense Authorization talks that would require the FBI to inform candidates for federal office if they're being investigated as part of counterintelligence operations. Quote, the speaker is blocking my provision to root out the illegal weaponization that led to Crossfire Hurricane, Arctic Frost, and more. He is siding with Democrat Representative Jamie Raskin against Trump Republicans to block this provision to protect the deep state. This is an easy one. This bill is dead on arrival unless this provision gets added in as it was passed out of committee. The unusual public feud amongst House higher-ups comes as Stefanik runs for governor and readies to leave her congressional seat next year. The provision was in reaction to congressional Republicans' probe into the origins of the FBI Director James Comey's 2016 investigation. Now, I don't want to get into all the weeds because we're running late. But Johnson told reporters, "I don't exactly know why Elise won't just call me." He noted that Stefanik is upset about the provision and that he's offered to help her resolve it. "I support her provision. I mean, I would vote for it. I think it's smart, and I'm not sure why it wasn't included. I don't know why she's frustrated with me. I literally had nothing to do with it." Stefanik immediately took to X after Johnson's press conference to throw more fuel on the fire, charging just more lies from the speaker. This is his preferred tactic to tell members when he gets caught torpedoing the Republican agenda. Wow. Well, there you go. Stefanik also yesterday, a statement from her office, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, again, gubernatorial candidate, chair of the House Republican leadership, signed the discharge petition filed by Representative Anna Paulina to ban members of Congress, their spouses, and dependent children from owning or trading individual stocks. Stefanik saying, "Throughout my entire 11 years in Congress, I have never purchased or traded a single individual stock because I believe it is unethical." Meanwhile, we have seen members of Congress in both parties abuse their position in elected office by making millions on stock trades. No one has been more corrupt in this practice than former Democrat Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This bipartisan, common sense, good governance discharge position will finally crack down on the corrosive decay of a Congress that is failing the American people, particularly New Yorkers who are struggling with an affordability crisis created by Governor Hochul. Now, speaking of that affordability crisis, yesterday, some Democrat-leaning groups roasted our green energy law as undeniable and is why we're seeing soaring costs. This was by the Democrat-leading think tank, the Progressive Policy Institute, found a clear and undeniable pattern of failure across the most critical mandates of the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Act. PPI's report author Neil Brown said New York set bold climate targets but ignored the economy and technical realities required to achieve them. How long have we been talking about this, folks? How many, well, almost 3 years now with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. The result is an energy system that is less reliable, more expensive, and now politically unsustainable. Unless policymakers course correct, the state risks turning a climate leadership story into a cautionary tale. You can find this at the New York Post. We can't read all the, the nickels and the dimes and the 8% here and the goals and this and that. In sum, though, the report said the timelines for the green energy mandates are impractical. The state's green energy law set a lofty goal of 100% zero-emission electricity by 2040 and 70% renewable non-fossil fuel energy by 2030. The law also promised to reduce gas emissions from 1990 levels by 40% and 85% by 2030 and 2015, respectively. But replacing natural gas with less predictable options like solar and wind has been a struggle, and the grid has grown less reliable as demand for energy surges and the state's aging utility infrastructure is increasingly taxed. Boy, this sounds like sounds like they've been watching Frankly Speaking, doesn't it? And this is, again, coming from a Democrat group. This is not coming from Republicans. Representative Elise Stefanik pounced on this. Kathy Hochul and single-party Democrat rule have caused the affordability crisis with New York families paying the highest energy and utilities prices in the nation. And ahead of the election year, Kathy Hochul is desperately lying to voters with a politically cynical pause on her natural gas ban when she has every intention of implementing it after Election Day, which will cause a further skyrocketing of energy prices for New Yorkers. New Yorkers of all political parties will vote her out this November. Wow. We've got something else to talk about with that when we return. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Thank you so much for the update from this viewer. So Elise Stefanik and I did not see this morning. You are ahead of the curve, and I do appreciate that, ahead of the curve. All right. Great news. This was released by Elise Stefanik on Facebook, on our official Facebook page. Great news. After a productive discussion I had last night with President Trump and Speaker Johnson, the provision requiring congressional disclosure when the FBI opens counterintelligence investigations into presidential and federal candidates seeking office will be included in the IAA-NDAA bill on the floor. This is a significant legislative win delivered against the illegal weaponization of the deep state. And of course, while this is an important step, there's much more work to do. So thank you for giving us that update and clarifying that. I do appreciate it. Rick writes in, good morning, Frank. Good morning, Rick. Mike Johnson's response to the Pete Hegseth debacle was, I haven't had a chance to review it. Trump says, I didn't know anything about a second strike. Apparently, Johnson and Trump haven't had any contact with the outside world the last few days. In fact, Trump said Hegseth didn't know anything about a second strike either. That's after Hegseth said he watched the whole thing the day it happened, and now he's saying he only watched the first strike. Let's not let these Pinocchios get away with this. None of them have been held accountable for any crooked things they have done since this mess started in January. The Liars Club had their meeting with the chief liar today. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for letting me wake up every morning and be on this team, and on in nauseam. In the meantime, Trump keeps falling asleep while he's supposed to be getting updates from his band of merry followers. Does that mean? Well, I think it does. It means Sleepy Don. Of course it does. What a jar of pickles we have ourselves in. Oh, man, it's so funny to see everybody trying to talk, non-Trump supporters trying to talk about Trump's work ethic and time and all that he's been doing behind the scenes. That's funny. Because I don't remember those. I don't remember those same conversations, Rick, that we had when Biden was in office. I just don't. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Great interview with Whey Jennings. Well, thank you. You have a gift to be able to keep a conversation going. Thank you. I can't. Yeah. Well. Yeah. The rest. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It was an interesting one. I liked it a lot. I'll tell you the interview. I'm glad it all worked out because he was very busy. But your comments are very nice. All right. I got to get to this. Do I have time? Got to take a break. Stay with us. Our last break, and then wrapping things up, we got the New York Post editorial board on this affordability crisis. We'll be right back. Stay with us. There we go. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So we were talking about that report coming out from the kind of a left-leaning group that shows that the energy policies are just not there. That we are not prepared in New York State for the climate action plan. And we talked about this on the program since essentially day one, that the grid is going to go down, that the costs are going to, and everything is coming to fruition. When the latest warning that New York's climate action plan is a slow rolling disaster, the pragmatic liberals at the Progressive Policy Institute have called out the absurd green energy law as an undeniable failure. The PPI report talks politely about the ideals behind the 2019 law, pushed by then Governor Andrew Cuomo, and until recently fully embraced by Governor Hochul. Until recently, remember that. But grimly sums up that its only real impact has been driving up costs for families while constraining reliable supply. Indeed, the New York Independent System Operator, the outfit in charge of the state's grid, recently warned that the grid is at rapidly increasing risk of failure as the climate mandates are making power supplies ever less reliable, while also stressing electric transmission lines. PPI details the grim costs of the Cuomo-Hochul agenda. New York electricity prices are 44% higher than the national average. Residential rates have Residential rates have risen 36% since 2019, almost 3 times as faster than in the rest of the country. Utilities this year are seeking 20% rate hikes to cover the costs the state's imposing. New York's wildly impractical plans for new offshore wind power generation are only 1% operational. It has reached just 8% of its 2030 goals for energy storage capacity. The state simply ignored the economic and technical realities required to meet its goal, said the co-author. And that's what we talked about. It was more about the virtue signaling. It was more about having that press conference and then calling it a day. and not worrying about the real-world implications. Now comes a rapid retreat from the plan after billions have already gone down the drain. But remember, it's because we're coming up on an election next year. New York Energy Board recently recommended pushing back the date to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2030 to 2036, though even that's impractical. The state's burning more fossil fuel than it was a decade ago. The board urges looking to build a 2 to 3 gigawatt nuclear plant for starters, as its chair calls nuclear a real bright spot when it comes to cost and reliability. Even the Clean Power Alliance is calling out the climate madness. Meanwhile, Hochul last month paused the state's all-electric building mandate. Staring at next year's election, the governor confessed that she needs to review all our options and perhaps rewrite the climate law to avoid sending consumer bills soaring higher. She's even making kind noises about nuclear plants. What she won't do is admit that the entire green energy push is completely at odds with making New York life more affordable, or that her fellow Democrats, who've repeatedly killed nuke plants in New York, with Andrew Cuomo forcing Indian Point to shut down, let alone that the state would be far better off if it abandoned Cuomo's ban on fracking, which we've talked about a million times, and so allowed the completely safe extraction of natural gas that proved such a huge boon next door in Pennsylvania. At least Hochul seems to have realized that lame-brained and taxpayer-funded ad campaign won't convince the public to suffer in silence. Yet the truth she doesn't dare face is that the Empire State needs to scrap this scheme altogether and embrace energy policy that serves New Yorkers' needs, not the radical green agenda. What a great way to end the show as I make a mess. Thank you for all the comments this morning. We got Mark saying, I think Elise Stefanik needs to focus a lot on New York City as the votes are there. Have a great day, Frank. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Whey Jennings. Thank you for all the comments. And we'll be back. My goodness, that went quick this morning, didn't it? So much breaking news. I felt like it breezed right along. But I do want to thank Whey Jennings, who will be in Hornell on Sunday. Tickets are still available, so make sure you reach out before that sells out. Have a great day, everyone. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I look forward to it already.